be here with all of you. I know some of you are maybe thinking, well, where's your other or better half, as I like to say. But my husband, Scott, is, well, he might actually already be sitting at LAX airport waiting to get onto a flight that will eventually take him to Tanzania, Africa. And he is heading for a second part in his mentoring series that he is doing with some of the African pastors. They took 25 pastors in key areas in Tanzania and brought them together in August. And then they took 5 of their key leaders there in Africa who were coming alongside to mentor these 25 pastors as they go out to start churches. And so this is kind of a checkup as Scott is going and then training them on the next wave of what to do at this point in your church. So he is there. Next Sunday, he will be in England. And I'm a little bit envious, although as he packed last night, he said, how do I go from 85-degree weather to snow on Saturday? And so he got the bigger suitcase out to be able to pack more clothes. And so I will be joining you next week as well. And as I was praying, okay, Lord, what would you have me share? I get blessed to be there for 2 weeks in a row. And God laid on my heart 2 main words. They went together in 3, and it was lead and follow. And I love the weekend after Thanksgiving because I pull out the Christmas decorations. Has anybody kind of start to put up a little tree or little twinkling lights already in your area? My son insisted on lights in his bedroom. And so he has so much Scotch tape all over those walls because he took lights and strung them all the way around all 4 corners or walls in his room. I have a feeling when I get home tonight or today, they will all be down because it's so stinking hot that the Scotch tape's going to fall off the walls and the lights will be down on the ground. And so as I looked at, okay, Lord, lead and follow, I thought of 2 very ordinary but not so highlighted parts of the Christmas story. And so, somebody tell me, is today officially an Advent Sunday? I think it's next Sunday starts Advent. When there's 5 weeks because Christmas Eve is on Sunday, it kind of messes me up. But today, we're starting Advent here. And so I want us to look at the Christmas star. And today we're going to look at what are some lessons we can learn from the Christmas star. How many of you have ever gone stargazing? Living here, you kind of get to do that every night, right? Yeah. Except when there are clouds in the sky. Well, I remember a very significant evening that I went to look at the stars. It was in August of 1989. And I was up at Forest Home Christian Conference Center up in the High Sierras, and we were there with high school students. I was went as a counselor for our high school kids. And there was this boy who was also there as a counselor. And I thought he was very good looking, and I thought, I'm going to have that boy get to know me. And so one evening after dinner, and it was getting dark, and the kids were kind of going different ways, and this guy and I decided just to kind of walk, and I said, hey, you know, there's this really cool area where you can oversee everything. And he was wearing this sweatshirt, and so I did what we girls do. Oh, I'm getting a little cold. See, I was kind of conniving. And so he was a gentleman, and he loaned me his sweater, and then we started to look out at the stars, and I think he was going, yeah, this is nice. What's this girl doing? And then I said, wait, look, do you see the arrow in the sky? And he looked, and I thought I'd get a little closer to show him the arrow. And he said, yeah, that's Orion. And he started to walk away. Well, I not only got to have that boy as a boyfriend, I got to marry that boy. Whoa. And that sweatshirt is long gone. But almost every night that I look in the sky, I look for that arrow. Because when I see that arrow, and I didn't even know what Orion was, and I didn't realize that the 3 stars that I thought just made up part of the arrow was Orion's belt. And, you know, people, it's been famous, but for me it was God's sign. It was the arrow in the sky. And that reminds me of one of the greatest blessings that God has brought into my life. Well, that's what the Christmas star did, right? It pointed the way. It was a symbol of the greatest blessing that was to be brought into all of our lives. Now, scientists, theologians, they've all had issues with what is the Christmas star. There's a couple of different popular ideas of what the Christmas star might be. Well, one is that maybe it was a whole bunch of the planets starting to come together on that night and just creating this luminous, beautiful, bright star. But nobody really knows. And then some also say it could be a supernova explosion. Sounds really cool, huh? Well, that is a stellar explosion that briefly outshines an entire galaxy. And then there are those who say, really? It was what we might call the Shekinah glory, which means the dwelling of God, is a miraculous, unexplainable event where God shows part of himself. And this morning, as we look at what is the Christmas star, I want us to go with that. That it is a display of God's power and God's light. And so we want to look at it as, what does that mean for us? When my oldest daughter was in 4th grade, she was a part of a Christmas pageant, and it was called the Christmas Star. And she got to be Chrissy, the Christmas Star. And I remember being blown away because I didn't actually know my daughter could sing. And she had asked us not to go to any of the practices because she wanted it to be a surprise. And I remember her standing on the stage singing about how she was going to shine for Jesus. And it touched my heart in a huge way. Well, that's the lesson for us, is what does it mean to shine? See, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. The Christmas star gave us 3 specific things that we can look at. But before we do that, I want us to remember this star was only mentioned one time in the Bible. And yet, look at all of the thousands of dollars that has been created on people selling the star, right? And we find that the star is mentioned in Matthew 2:1. Where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? We saw his star. Not we saw a star. We saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him. You know, thousands of years before that, Isaiah wrote, Arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. My hope is that this morning we can claim that verse for ourselves. So what do we learn from the Christmas star? Well, the first thing that we can learn is that the star, like all stars, reflect the sun. But we can reflect the S-O-N. That we get to choose, even this morning, do I want to reflect the sun, or do I want to turn my light switch off? And so, in Numbers chapter 6:25, it says, the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. I was looking at what does it mean to reflect? Well, there's a lot of different meanings. And yet one that I like is so simple. It simply says this, to show the image of whatever is being reflected. A simple mirror. I don't know if I want to ask this question, but how many of you actually looked in a mirror this morning? Okay? Maybe some of us were like, oh yeah, maybe I should have looked in the mirror. I love when I go to work, and I work in an elementary school now. And I go to work, and my daughter had told me when I went and visited her at college in October, Mom, you really need to start wearing mascara. I thought, wow, maybe I am aging a little bit. Because I said, okay, so I started wearing mascara. Well, I realized at about 2 p.m., a little first grader said, Miss Kathy, what's wrong with your eye? I said, I don't know. Well, you got a black eye. And so I went to the bathroom and I learned a lesson. I should look in a mirror more, especially if I'm wearing mascara, because it was all over my eyes. A mirror reflects whatever image. How many of you have had that not so great experience when you're driving just before sunset time? And yet all of a sudden, the light comes to reflect off your windshield and blind you, right? And that moment of, where you feel like the Apostle Paul, when he was Saul, walking on the road to Damascus, and God reveals himself, and you're about to go crash into somebody else because the light's so bright. Man, I wish I could be a windshield. I want to be a windshield for Jesus. If I could reflect his light so brightly in my life. Now, I don't want anybody to crash as a result. And I don't want to turn anyone off to Christ. And yet, let me ask, what does it mean for you specifically to reflect the sun? You know, in Philippians 2:14, it says, do everything without grumbling or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. Do you ever feel like a cracked mirror? Like you set out in the morning to shine for Jesus, and something happens. And somehow the crack begins in the mirror. And then something happens and it just gets frustrating. Or maybe you hear some news, or maybe you open up your bank account, or maybe your child calls you with something that just weighs heavily on your heart, and you just become discouraged, or angry, or worried, or stressed. And all of a sudden, that mirror's just cracking. Philippians, Paul tells us, do everything without grumbling. So I got my Christmas decorations out on Friday. I was actually pretty impressed because it was the first time Scott and I got all of them out in one day and put up instead of just sitting in box for about 2 weeks. Well, as I was pulling them out, I found this little heart-shaped box that we always love to put under the Christmas tree. We started this tradition the year that we moved to Northern California to start a church. And our daughters were 3, or as the oldest at that point wanted to say, I'm 3.5. And then our youngest was just a baby. And so in this box, every year, we would sit and say, what are we going to give Jesus this year? And I love opening up that box to kind of fish through. Well, I found one of the first ones. It was Caitlin's from December of 2000. And when I opened that, it just made me laugh. Caitlin said, I give Jesus my cranky butt. And, you know, I thought, Jesus, I think I need to put that on my mirror. Because I want to shine for you. I want to reflect you. I don't want to be a cranky butt. Maybe we need to take that message with us today. Well, you know, not only do we need to reflect him, but we need to be willing to shine in the darkness. There's a story told about a young man who was in college and he was training to become an Olympic diver. And he grew up in an atheist home. And so he was taught that those religious people were weak. They just used God as a crutch because God was not real. And he went out to college, and if you know anything about college, it seems like that's the message of college as well. And he bought in to the lies that this world can share. But God brought a Christian friend into his life. And the diver wasn't turned off by this guy. He wasn't banging a Bible in his head. He wasn't telling him how wrong he was. He wasn't making him feel guilty on a Saturday morning after a Friday night. But this friend was able to reflect the love of Jesus and also was able to start to kind of share the gospel message. Well, one night, the diver wanted to go and get one more practice in. So he went into the indoor pool at his college, and there were moonlights or skylights above the pool. And so it just filtered in this light as he went to climb the stairs for the high dive. And as he turned around and stretched out his arms, he realized and looked on the wall the image of a cross. And in that moment, the light shining from above showed him his way. And he fell on his knees, and he turned his life over to Christ. And while he was praying, a maintenance man came in and flipped on the lights. The diver turned around, looked down, and realized there was no water in the pool. God had saved him, not just literally, but that night his life was transformed because a Christian friend came into his life and didn't tell him all the things he did wrong, but simply reflected Jesus. And he shone the light and love of Jesus in a very dark place. My daughter Kelsey, our youngest daughter, I should say, she came home from college this week, and it was wonderful. And we were talking, and I was able to go up and see her at the beginning of October and meet some of her friends. And her roommate and some of the girls in her area, really sweet girls. In about 1 hour, I could kind of tell they weren't brought up in a Christian home. And their values were not the values that we had raised Kelsey with. So I was asking Kelsey, how's it going? And she said, you know, Mom, I'm a good kid. You keep thinking all these terrible things. I said, yeah, because you're going to Chico State, which is like known as the party school of all party schools. But she said, Mom, I'm a good kid. I'm at least better than my friends. And I thought, I'm not sure if that's a good thing. You know, it's interesting about stars. I love to see shooting stars. But shooting stars really are a star burning out. I don't know if any of you remember where you were on June 14th, 2015. Might not ring a bell off the top of your head. I know where I was. I was coming home from Hemet. I'd gotten off the 78 freeway on San Marcos Boulevard, and I was connecting to Palomar Airport Road. And all of a sudden, I saw this beam of light, like nothing I had ever seen. And it just was like, boom, and I thought, God, are you coming? You know, Jesus, are you coming? And then it started to kind of move across the sky, but not like a shooting star, and a very unique thing. And I thought, boy, what are they doing at Camp Pendleton? This is kind of bizarre. Well, Scott and our youngest, Jake, were up in the high Sierras fishing. And before I got home, they called me. They said, we just saw the coolest thing. And they described this light in the sky that went across. And then I turned the news on. It was newsworthy. It wasn't just like a message to Kathy Kirk on Palomar Airport Road. And you know what was interesting? That light, scientists don't really know what that was. But they think that that flash came in the middle of the distant galaxy and the star was being caught in a black hole's gravitational tide. And so that very, very rare phenomenon was because the light was getting sucked into the darkness. And isn't that true with what can happen to so many of us? You see, before we can reflect the sun, we have to know the sun. We have to be able to say, Jesus, I want you to be a part of my life. And once we do, we can shine. But there is always darkness around us. There is always something that's going to sometimes entice us. There are movies that come out, and you know, they look funny, but they might not be good for my brain. You know, there are times when I was growing up that my friends were doing things. It looked fun. It could suck me in. There are times that I can, again, be shining, and all of a sudden, I look at my son's grades. No, I'm joking about that. But somehow my attitude can drastically change, and the darkness can start to suck me in. What's the darkness for you? What's the black hole? And how close are you to it? You see, the Christmas star, it stayed away from the black hole. Our job is to shine in the darkness. John 1:5 says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. You know the beauty of Jesus? Not only did he come as a babe, but he came for the purpose of dying on the cross so that when we get sucked into the black hole, when we turn our back on God, when we make choices, even in the moment that God doesn't like, he wants to forgive us. And he reaches into the black hole and he pulls us out. I want to take just a moment. Think about this last week. I know for some of us, Thanksgiving is a wonderful, exciting time, and time to be with family. For some of us, Thanksgiving can be a struggle because maybe our family's not around us. Maybe some of the relationships that we have with our family are not the best. It can also lead us into a very stressful season. Although Christmas is wonderful, it can become incredibly stressful. We can look at our bank account and say, how are we going to pay the bills, let alone get some gifts? And we can start to doubt God. Think over this last week. Were there any black holes that were trying to suck you in? That maybe you need to turn over to the Lord and just say, I want your light to become bright. Put some Windex on me, Jesus. Wipe me clean so I can reflect you. I want to stop and pray for us right now. Jesus, I thank you that you are the sun, and you desire to have a relationship with us, not one just of knowledge, but one of a personal connection. And yet, Lord, you see our hearts. You know what's come out of our mouths. Lord, I pray, like David prayed, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me, so that I can shine for you. In your name, amen. Well, as long as we shine in the darkness and stay away from those black holes, we can then point the way. Who is it that the Lord's brought into your life that this Christmas season you can be that arrow pointing to Jesus? Daniel 12:3 says, those who are wise will shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Who is it that God is calling you to lead to righteousness? You know, I know in my own home, I'm praying heavily for my children because the message of their culture is so strong. It is so strong. And one of the things that I have found, because I'm mom, some of my time to speak into their lives is over. For my girls who are out of my home in general, because they keep coming back, and they say this generation, we might be stuck with them forever, but I have learned that if I say little and do much, it speaks volumes. And Christmas time, they always say this is the biggest time next to Easter when people are open to the gospel. But one of the number one ways we can do that is by loving them. I was talking about this message with my family around the dinner table, and actually my Scott's sister and her husband were there, and I said, hey guys, I want an illustration of somebody who points the way to Jesus. And Jake said, well, Moses. I mean, think about what Moses did. He led the people. Oh, but what about David? And he killed that guy. And my brother-in-law's like, geez, Jake, you're just rattling them off. And Jake said, that's what happens when you're a pastor's kid. But then I said, and I was thankful he knows these stories. But then he said, hey, what about Martin Luther King? It was interesting because I was looking up quotes on light and on shining, and one of the quotes came up from Martin Luther King. You know, Martin Luther King was born the son of a preacher. And he was incredibly bright. He actually skipped 2 levels of grades growing up and went on to go to college, and then went on to go and get his master's in theology and become a pastor. And yet so many people see him more than just a pastor, because he transformed the culture. And Martin Luther King said this, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. That's love, you see. It is redemptive. And this is why Jesus says love. There's something about love that builds up and is creative. There is something about hate that tears down and is destructive. So love your enemies. Who is God calling you to love? This Christmas season, as we reach out in tangible ways, we don't need to say anything, but we can show Jesus. We can shine in the dark. I love Matthew 5:16. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. Shine. You might know the song, Shine, Jesus, Shine. I'm sad that our church doesn't really sing this song anymore, but I love this song. And I just want to read to you the words. Lord, the light of your love is shining, in the midst of your darkness shining. Jesus, light of the world, shine upon us. Set us free by the truth you now bring us. Shine on me. Shine, Jesus, shine. Fill this land with the Father's glory. Blaze, Spirit, blaze. Set our hearts on fire. Flow, river, flow. Flood the nations with grace and mercy. Send forth your word, Lord, and let there be light. You know how there is to be light? It's because he places it in each one of us as we choose to follow Christ. One of the traditions of Christmas that I love is at the end of our evening service, they pass out candles. How many of you have ever done this, right? And then at the end, we sing Silent Night. And they light the candles in 2 different ends of the sanctuary, and then everybody shines and shares the light. And that's the illustration I want to leave you today, is that Christ came as a baby to be the light of the world. And if he has touched your life, He has put a flame inside of you. So shine brightly this Christmas season. Reflect him. Shine in the darkness. Shine with your neighbors. Shine with the people who are in line at the store and they're so frustrated and they're looking grumpy because these lines are so long and I couldn't find a parking spot. Maybe pull back and say, you take my parking spot. Have a Merry Christmas. Jesus loves you. And then point the way. Let me pray for us. Jesus, I thank you that you are the light of the world and that you desire to transform our lives, that we may be your light to a hurting world. Lord, for some of us who just feel like our battery's dying, we're not the Energizer Bunny. Blaze, Spirit, blaze in our lives. Holy Spirit, come upon us. Refresh us and renew us. Charge our battery so that we might shine brightly. Show us those individuals that we need to point the way for. Show us the ways to love so that we may let our light shine, so others may see our good deeds, not for the sake of us, but to bring praise and glory to you. In your name, amen.